Okay, I wanted to just do a quick review of this camera. It's the Akaso EK7000. I waited a while to do the review so I could get a little more experience with it. Again, I was using it mostly, almost exclusively for recording stuff on the plane. The layout is very similar to a lot of other budget cameras. It's got the power button on the front, the OK on the top, the up and down buttons on the side, and this usual HDMI and USB ports on the other side with a slot for a USB card. And it takes the same 32 gig cards as the Wimius and most of the other action cameras. First impressions. When I first got it, other than the front, it's kind of cool because it matches the coloring on my plane. Besides the appearance, which is actually a little bit nicer than the Wimius, everything else, I think I'd go with the Wimius if I was going to get a budget camera. And this definitely is a budget camera. I think I paid around 70-80 bucks for it. It just does not compare to the GoPro or the Garmin cameras, especially when you jump up to 4K. There's a noticeable difference. I mean, a really noticeable difference in quality. Is it 4K? Yeah, it's absolutely 4K. It's about the same quality as the Wimius. I can't knock it for that. It has the same kind of green shift problem that the Wimius has, which is correctable on software, but just the color accuracy isn't as good as the more expensive cameras. This camera, I'll turn it on real quick. And it does boot up a little bit faster than the Wimius for what that's worth. The LED is on the top. Do I prefer that? I guess it depends on how you're going to use it. I prefer it on the side like the Wimius has. Actually, I think it's on the back on the Wimius. It's a little more convenient on the back. Okay, as far as operation goes, starting a recording works the same as most of the other action cameras. You hit the OK button once, it starts recording. If you're in video mode, if you're in camera mode, if you press it, it takes a picture. Same as the other ones. The menu structure I really don't like. It works the same way to get into it, though. You get to the settings, then you hit OK. The thing that I don't like, and I'll angle this so it's a little easier to see on the camera. If you can see there, there's just one big long list of settings. I like the way that Wimius did it, where they grouped it into sections that are kind of related. Here you got to scroll through the whole list to find them. The other thing I don't like is, in order to get out, you have to scroll all the way up to the list or all the way to the bottom of the list, and then you can get to the exit button. Otherwise, that's the only way to get out. Not a huge deal, but I think Wimius did a better job with the user interface. That's about all I have to say about functionality and quality, because really it's almost identical quality-wise and function-wise, except for the lousy user interface as the Wimius. It records in MOV format instead of MP4. I prefer working with MP4 files. They're just a little more compatible with everything. If you don't care, it's not a drawback. What is a drawback is the batteries on this one seem to only last about 20 minutes. The most I've ever gotten recording in 4K is 15-20 minutes, and it's time to switch batteries. The Wimius definitely lasts a good 30-40 minutes, and you see it automatically shuts off there if you're not doing anything. Okay, fit and finish wise, it's about the same as the Wimius Q1 as well. You can see that review that I did several months back. If you want to take a look at the Wimius, and I would recommend the Wimius over this one. I'm not going to send it back because it's good enough for what I'm using it for, but if I had it to do again, I'd just get another one of those. Fit and finish wise, it's virtually identical. I like the battery door on the Wimius. There's a little catch thing here that you can pull that makes this a little easier to get out, whereas this one you just got to kind of fight with it. Functionality wise, actually I'll just bring up the menu and show you. If I go into the settings, and again I'll angle it so you can, hope the camera picks this up. If you go into the video resolution, man, that is really hard to see on the camera. I'll just try to explain it for you. The top one, if I can get to it, there's 1080p 60 frames per second, 1080p 30 frames per second, 4K 25 frames per second, and that's my gripe right there, is the 4K is 25 frames per second, not 30. You've got 2K at 30 frames per second, 720 at 120, and 720 at 30 frames per second, which is similar to the Wimius Q1, except the Wimius Q1 will do 30 frames per second in 4K. If you're hoping to make cinematic quality videos with the 4K on this, save your money and get a better camera, because the 4K it just doesn't compare to the more expensive cameras like GoPro and Garmin and Sony and so on. It's just not there. The color accuracy is nowhere near as good, and it's not as sharp as the higher quality cameras. But you get what you pay for. Okay, my other small gripe, and it depends on what you're using it for, whether this matters to you or not. But the time lapse, it only goes from 2 seconds down to 60 seconds. The Q1 has a better range of values. I believe the Wimius goes to 1 minute. I could be wrong, could be higher than that. But I like the fact that it starts at half a second, and then it has the half second, 1 second, and then goes on from there, the same as this one. If you don't care about that, if you never use time lapse, then it's not an issue. But I like the half second interval for recording really long flights, so I don't have to speed it up in a video editor. As far as functionality, I think that's my only gripe. So if you do have your heart set on one of these, and you got 70 or 80 bucks burning a hole in your pocket, I'd go check it out. Before you decide on one of these, I would highly recommend taking a look at the Wimius Q1. Or whatever the latest and greatest in budget cameras is when you see this. My overall impression, it's about the same quality, video quality, for comparable modes. It has the same kind of slight green shift problem that the Q1 has. So as far as video quality, it's virtually identical. In fact, I think I read somewhere that they use the same video, the same CCD chip. The big drawbacks for me are MOV format. I wish it recorded in MP4. If you have your heart set on one of these, I'd go take a look at it. I went and got this one at Amazon for, I think it was 70 or 80 bucks. Quality-wise, and don't compare this to the higher price, like $300-400 cameras or $500 cameras. It just does not compare. The 4K is not as crisp. The color accuracy isn't as good. It has the same kind of slight green shift problem that the Q1 has. If you just want a cheap camera to record videos with, it's great. I'm not going to send it back, even though I do prefer the Wimius Q1. And oddly enough, the paint scheme goes exactly with my paint scheme on my plane. So for me, that's a plus. The case for the camera is a little bit nicer actually than the Wimius Q1. It's a little easier to to snap closed, especially getting it open. The latch on the Q1 is kind of retarded. This one's way easier to get out. So my I guess in conclusion, my biggest gripes are the battery lasts about 10% less than the Q1. The format is MOV instead of MP4. I don't like the LED on the top. I prefer it on the back. And some of the video modes for what I want to use it for are it doesn't support as many modes for what I want to use it for. And the 4K is only 25 frames per second as opposed to 30 on the Wimius. Okay, this here is the Q1 and this is the Akaso. The LEDs are on the back of the Q1. I prefer that better. The battery life on the Q1 is about 10% better, maybe even a little more. They both use the exact same battery and they're interchangeable. The chargers that they come with are also interchangeable. The latch on this battery thing has this little slidey thing that makes getting that open a little easier. Unless you have long fingernails or more patience than I do, you're gonna struggle with that battery door. And because of the battery suckage, you're gonna use it more. The other preferences I have with the Q1 over the Akaso is this one records in 30 frames per second, 4K. This one's only 25. 1080p. If you're recording apples to apples, they're identical. There's no difference in image quality. They both have that slight green shift problem. So if you're looking for better quality, you're gonna have to spend more money. The video quality is pretty much identical for both of them. The big detractor and one of the things that may frustrate the hell out of you is this one. Actually, I've got the card taken out of this one right now. This one, I just take the card out and put it in the SD card adapter and put it in the computer to transfer the files, because the USB driver for the Akaso is so flaky, you'll get halfway through a transfer and it'll fail with drive not mounted or some other stupid error. This one never does that. It always works. Either way, transferring with either one of these, it's going to be faster if you just take the card out and put it in the computer. But if you don't care, if you just want to hook it up to the computer, plug it into USB, go grab a sandwich, it doesn't matter. They transfer about the same rate. It's just this one always screws up and this one doesn't. And that may be a driver issue that's already been resolved, so I would look into that before considering that a major issue, but take that for what it's worth. You can see that the sides of these are virtually identical, as well as the buttons. I find that these buttons are also a little easier to use. The buttons around the case of this one, when this one's in the case, I find a little bit easier to use. You really got to reef on the buttons on the Q1. This one, not so much. So this one's definitely easier to use inside the case. So that's about it. I don't want to be a Debbie Downer, because it's not that bad a camera, especially if you're only using it in 1080p. Other than I don't like the format that it records in. It's almost identical to the Q1, but it will use a little bit more battery. So take that for whatever it's worth. And then I think the Q1's actually a little bit cheaper too. So I guess that's about it. Thanks for watching.